Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Friday recap here on RaceWeek. Before we go into the recap, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and follow RaceWeek on Twitter at twitter.com/raceweek_show. The RaceWeek website should be launched within the next couple of days. Just got a couple of things to finalise, but today I will be looking back on what was a fairly incident-packed Friday at the Russian Grand Prix. The first practice session was full of drama, as this track is fairly unused throughout the year, and particularly this year due to the pandemic. And there had already been the F2 session, but it was a fairly green track, so there were not much grip out there, and there were a lot of mistakes. For example, Carlos Sainz went off, I believe, at turn 7, and then Nicholas Latifi crashed actually quite heavily at turn 10. Both cars were repaired and were out for FP2, thankfully. Whilst many others came a crop, you had Romain Grosjean and Danny Kvyat having spins. And it was a fairly unrepresentative session when it came to the order, because everyone was just getting on with their own program, getting to learn the track. It wasn't a smooth session for Mercedes, as both drivers locked up on one of their faster laps and lost a set of tyres. But once again, I believe for the 6th race running, Valtteri Bottas it was that topped the first practice session ahead of Daniel Ricciardo. The Renault, I think we should expect good things from Renault. It's a track that really suits them, this circuit is. It's got a lot of long straights and a lot of medium to low speed corners, and that's the sort of thing that really suits that car. Third place, you had Max Verstappen. On the other hand, he was not that confident going into this weekend. He says that the team will not be anywhere near Mercedes, so we will have to wait and see what happens with them. Sergio Perez was 4th, ahead of Lance Stroll in 5th. Esteban Ocon was in 6th, ahead of Danny Kvyat in 7th. Alex Albon in 8th. Sergio Perez in 9th, with Pierre Gasly rounding out the top 10. Then you had Leclerc, Sainz, Norris, Giovinazzi, Raikkonen, Magnussen, Russell, Grosjean, Lewis Hamilton. Other than the lap that he messed up as a result of locking up, he was mainly focusing on race runs, hence why he was down in 19th. With Nicholas Latifi rounding out the field in the first practice session. As I said, the first practice session was nowhere near representative of what we might see in the remainder of the weekend, because everyone was getting accustomed to a very difficult track, which took a while to rubber in, and it was the second practice where you had a lot more representative running. So, taking a look at the result of the second practice session, and the drivers did not run into as many issues. I mean, you had a couple of drivers making mistakes. For example, a few drivers making mistakes at turn 13, which seemed to be the most difficult corner out there, with a couple of cars spinning, including Lance Stroll, and a few others running wide into the runoff area. But it was a fascinating session which saw Valtteri Bottas once again top the timesheet in the Mercedes, 2/10 ahead of Lewis Hamilton, who once again had a lockup on one of his runs towards the end of it. Daniel Ricciardo consolidating how good pace Renault has this weekend. He currently sits in third ahead of the two McLarens. This after Carlos Sainz's crash in free practice 1. they weren't able to get that back-to-back with a new nose cone. Lando Norris was running the new nose, and Carlos Sainz was running the old nose. But here they could. Carlos Sainz, both drivers were fairly close and set really good lap times to be 4th and 5th. Then you had Sergio Perez in 6th in the Racing Point. Then you had Max Verstappen, not a great lap. He actually made a slight mistake towards at the start of the lap, which I believe it was the end of the lap, which caused apparently he lost 3 tenths. Ferrari were quite a bit quicker than expected with 8th and 10th. Charles Leclerc 8th and Sebastian Vettel 10th with Esteban Ocon in 9th. He has quite a way to go to match his teammate. But interestingly, in the long runs, Daniel Ricciardo was running the mediums whilst Esteban Ocon was running the hards. And likewise, actually, with Mercedes, you had Valtteri Bottas doing a hard tyre stint on the long runs and Lewis Hamilton doing a soft tyre stint as a way of basically comparing the two. Then you had Gasly, Albon, Kvyat, Raikkonen, Latifi, Grosjean, Stroll was not able to get a clean run in. He finished in 17th ahead of Kevin Magnussen in 18th, Antonio Giovinazzi in 19th, and Romain Grosjean. He had a very difficult day, stating that he struggled to keep the car on track particularly throughout practice 1, and ended the day bottom of the pile. So that is free practice 2. And now it is time to talk about the Road to F1, the only session which we saw take place today, because obviously the F3 season has come to a close, is the Formula 2. And that, I think, is set to be an interesting race tomorrow. So, the Formula 2 qualifying session took place in between the 2 Formula 1 practice sessions, and it was an interesting session throughout. And the early pace was set by Jehan Daruvala, who was having probably the best pace he has shown all season. He was really, really fast throughout the session, and he was setting the initial pace. Robert Schwartzman was showing an improvement in qualifying after a bad showing in qualifying in Monza and a not great showing in Mugello. Nikita Mazepin was proving a brief threat to Jehan Daruvala, but then Daruvala took it immediately back in the first runs, with Yuki Tsunoda making it a Carlin 1-2 at that point. Then you had the second Florida runs, and it looked like Jehan Daruvala had it in the bag. But then, from nowhere, Yuki Tsunoda did quite the response and was able to take provisional pole position. And whilst Jehan Daruvala did improve, it was not enough. And it was Yuki Tsunoda who took pole position. And this was the bounce back he needed after a rough couple of races in Monza and Mugello. Of course, you have to remember, he needs to get into the top 3. If he gets into the top 3, there could be in the championship, there could be super license. I believe he will get a super license, and I'm quite convinced that with that AlphaTauri seat, if he gets that super license, he will drive for AlphaTauri in 2021. So there's a lot at stake for him to get that super license. Carlin showed incredible pace at the Sochi Autodrome throughout the session. Jehan Daruvala in second place. Mick Schumacher did a last gasp effort to qualify in third, ahead of Callum Ilott, who didn't show the qualifying pace that he usually does. Luca Giotto starts in fifth, although that could potentially change, as during the qualifying session he was under investigation for impeding Callum Ilott. Although, surely, if he was going to get a penalty, he would probably have got one by now. Christian Lundgaard qualified in 6th. Ahead of Robert Schwartzman, 7th is an improvement for him, but he feels like there are a couple of mistakes on his lap, and he could have started higher at his home race. But he is in range for a good result if he drives well in the race. Then you have Jack Aitken in 8th. Guan Yu Zhu would be disappointed with 9th after showing good pace in the initial run. With Nikita Mazepin as well, would be disappointed with that, having held provisional pole for a bit. Then he dropped down to 10th. Then you have Jury Vips, Pedro Piquet, Louis Delatres, Marcus Armstrong. Good qualifying for Jake Hughes on his Formula 2 debut. Ahead of Felipe Drugovich, Dan Tickton, Marino Sato, Roy Nissany, Artem Markelov. Giuliano Alesi will be disappointed with that in his first race for MP Motorsport, with Guilherme Samaya rounding out the field. Now the first Formula 2 race takes place tomorrow. But I'll be doing my I'll be briefly mentioning what happened, but I'll be doing my main review of the Formula 2 races on Monday after the race. Because obviously, last race, I decided to make the Saturday and Sunday recaps more focused on the Formula 1. But I recommend you tune in. It could be an interesting Formula 2 race and a crucial one in the title battle. So that is it from the Friday recap. Make sure you join us tomorrow after, I believe at around 5. Can't quite remember the time that I put you'll be able to see on this YouTube channel, but I believe it's going to be around 5 that is going to be the Saturday BST, where you will have the Saturday recap, where we will be looking back on what should be an interesting qualifying session in Sochi. I mean, Sochi does typically see a fascinating qualifying session, as well as an interesting F2 race, which typically is quite exciting at the Sochi Autodrome. I mean, I honestly think this track is very underrated, and I think when the new regulations come in, we are going to see much more exciting racing at this circuit. But thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow. I've got confirmation that it is 5 p.m. that we will have the qualifying day recap. We'll see you then here on RaceWeek. Make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and follow us on Twitter. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.